What's going on, everybody? I'm your boy Retro Bliss, and you are on Retro Bliss Rewind, and we are going to have a great show tonight. We're going to be talking about how to build your collection by buying on the cheap, maybe even reselling some of the games that you get to help build your collection even further. And we have a great guest tonight, but before I bring him on, I'm going to introduce our regular panel, Mike from Mike's Gaming Gala, and Brian from BD RetroMods. But it's my distinct honor and privilege to bring in Emceemur. What's going on, Mur? How you doing, brother?
Oh, I'm just having a good old time. How about you?
Man, I couldn't be better if I was in my right mind, brother. Well, I tell you what, before we get going, I don't know if any of you guys know anything about Mur, but I'm going to show you a little taste of what Mur's all about and why I asked him to be on the show. So without further delay, let's get to it. So in this episode, Mur is meeting with a reseller that he deals with from time to time. And this certain reseller had a certain lot that he wanted to sell, and he had a certain price point that he wanted to sell it at. And so I wanted to show you this clip as an example of how Mur deals with people and how he gets his games.
You know, we tried to make a deal with the seller on only a handful of games from this mega lot in the last episode, and the price wasn't bad. We were just a little too far apart. We just couldn't make the deal. He had traded a valuable comic book for this entire lot, so he had a target number he had to recoup, right? I get that. He was still figuring out pricing on everything individually, so I figured I would back off, give him some space, and see what he wanted to do with the whole thing. In a few days, as promised, he calls me back and offers to do a deal with me off-site. So that's fantastic. The only thing is, he had sold the majority of the lot off by that time to another seller. And why? Because they were able to buy it all in one hit for a price that he was comfortable with. You know, I understand that. I don't deal in volume. There was likely more there than I could have made an offer on anyway. But he's got 2 boxes of stuff here left over that did not go with the lot, and it's a decent amount of stuff. So if the price on this stuff is reasonable, I think we can work with this.
I knew you were the guy to go to. But we have a PlayStation 3 backward compatible that
Nice.
was there. We also, I think also a Wii U, one Wii U game, some PlayStation 2 stuff.
There are 2 very desirable consoles in here, alright? A backwards compatible PS3, which is great, and a Wii U. All the hookups are here, so yeah, I'm loving that. The rest of this lot is really a mixed bag. There's games for all different systems in here, and some of these games are really standing out to me right now. Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze for the Wii U. You know, I actually need a physical copy of this for my Wii U collection. I had got it digital for free years ago as part of a promo. And there's some retro here, including a copy of Sonic the Hedgehog 1 for the Sega Genesis in the box, missing the manual, but otherwise it's in really good shape. There's a freaking copy of Road Rash here for the Sega Genesis, complete in the box, the manual's in good shape. Who didn't love Road Rash? That game was so far ahead of its time. It still holds up today. And a gorgeous copy of Xenosaga for the PS2. You know, I've sold this game every time I have found it because it's worth something, right? I've always wanted to keep it and I just never have. Again, this is a great looking copy. If we come out all right on this, this may be the time I finally keep a copy for myself. There's a lot of odds and ends in this lot. Really cool stuff to look at. But before we get ahead of ourselves, I gotta hear a number.
So what are you thinking on all of this, man?
For all of it, I was thinking maybe 150.
$150? Done, right? No, you've got to slow down on these things, right? There are some components missing, right? There's a cover missing on the PS3. That should be easy enough to replace, but the Wii U is missing the gamepad. That's a pretty integral part of the operation there. It's still worth something in this condition, but yeah, you got to take all this into consideration, and without having tested these consoles, you really have to price it and assume that it may not work.
Man, I'd be more around 100.
Now hang on, I know what you're thinking. 100 is low, okay, and it is, but we're gonna start there, right? Because he's gonna come back at 125, and I'll take it.
Sounds good to me. Just, we're right in between the prices, so, and you always come in the shop with me, so.
Okay.
And he did. done. Yeah, now we're done. Definitely. We're getting all this for $125, and I couldn't be more thrilled about it. You know, technically this is the scraps from the big deal, right? But okay, scraps off a buffet this large? Man, that's still a lot of food.
All right, let's do it, man.
I appreciate it, Mr. Andy.
I appreciate you.
So we're back here at the Mer Cave, and yeah, we got some really nice stuff in this lot, provided it all works, right? But that's what we're up here to do. We're going to check it out. Are there bonus games in the drives? We don't know. It may have come out better than we thought. And there was already...
So there we go. That's just a taste. That's just a taste of how Mer operates, and I have seen this guy in action for hours and hours and hours. And actually have done some deals based on what I've watched Mer do. So explain yourself, Mer.
So there's
Explain yourself.
Yeah, there's a handful of lessons in that little exchange right there. The first one being that if you buy enough with specific sellers, you'll keep them coming to you. It won't always be you going to them. That particular seller there is a really good friend of mine. I've been dealing with him for the better part of 10 years. So he'll get stuff. He knows what I'm looking for, and a lot of times he'll let me know he's got some things, and we work things out. But I have an understanding with him. You know, he doesn't test a lot of that stuff because of how he comes across it. They're on, I think he cleans up properties that are, foreclosed or whatever, that are going to be resold or what. And, a lot of times there's just stuff laying around. And these guys also do like storage lockers. They buy, like they do on Storage Wars and stuff like that. So he just gets a lot of different things, but you can't always test all of it. So he knows I'm not going to come back to him if something doesn't work and be like, okay, man. And on the other side of that, he knows that he's going to give me a good deal because I'm assuming the risk. And I have no problem with that. So looking at that particular deal there, the hot spot was obviously that backwards compatible PS3. Did not work.
Oh, no.
Well, we don't look enough at the losses, and I've come to find that out, only here recently, and really just looked over the way I do things. We got to look at the losses too. I think we account for them because I tell you right there in that clip, hey, you can't come in too hot. What if some of this doesn't work? The Wii U was fine, but it didn't have the pad, so it's not worth a lot without that. But yeah, the PS3 did not work, but you can still sell these things for scraps because there's people that will fix them. Mm-hmm. And that should be me in most cases. I repair a lot of things, but PS3, I don't have my badge on that yet. That's a can of worms, especially as messed up as this one was inside. But yeah, you just got to make sure that you don't overpay. And I know that sounds like something very obvious, but it's easy to be like, okay, well, this is worth this, so I'll just give them this. And it's like, you don't want to lowball people and then make them not want to deal with you ever again. But at the same time, I buy a lot of stuff that ends up needing hours of cleaning and work. And I'm not complaining about that. That's part of it. That's part of what we do. And that's part of what's cool about bringing this stuff back. A lot of it's getting rescued from the garbage, so.
One thing I have found when I've watched your site, when you deal with people, you're a master at reading them. And when you read them, you can tell when people feel in their mind that what they have in their possession, they feel it's worth more than what it actually is. And when they have that feeling that its value is more than what it actually is, that you're not going to be able to negotiate. And 9 times out of 10, you keep walking.
A lot of times you can tell if they're just, they want to get that price. And if it's early in the day, they're wanting to see if they can get it from somebody. And I get that. Yep. So a lot of times you just circle back to those folks, and sometimes
you don't want to buy my complete in box Super Mario Bros. for $1 million. Come on, I know what I got. I know what I got.
But there's a good point to that.
They have now.
There's a good point to that though. That especially if you're looking for deals, you're looking to build a collection. You come across somebody who's just really dead set on getting that. Walk away. If you're at a game convention or something like that, you come at the end. That's where you'll potentially get the best deals. And we could talk a little about that risk reward later. It's like at the start, you get the best selection. At the end, you get the best deals. But a lot of the time, it's really not worth trying to hammer somebody down that is dead set on the price that they want. And I will say, too, with I don't have my PS3 badge either, but a lot of the systems that I bought, a big part is, to kind of weigh that risk of this might not be working. Knowledge is a big part of it. So, for instance, there was one point in time, 2 of them were complete in box, but I had 7 Atari Jaguars. And how I accumulated those 7 Atari Jaguars is they were listed locally on Kijiji. That's like Canadian Craigslist. No games, doesn't power on, as is. But if you have the knowledge that a Jaguar does not power on unless it has a game cartridge in it, you can take the risk. It may not work, but it is entirely possible that is a perfectly good Jaguar. They just don't have a game for it to power on. Stuff
I'll
like
admit
that.
to you, I didn't know that you had to have a cartridge in it.
Yeah, another good one. I
never fooled with one.
I used to have quite a few Odyssey 2s, and I would pick them up because, again, if there isn't a game in, it'll power on, but it'll look like all this random character garbage on the screen, and you think a chip's dead. But the Odyssey 2 is fine. It just needs a game to be plugged into it. And so all those Jaguars, one of them needed to be recapped, but other than that, they all worked fine. Every single Odyssey 2, like those things are built like tanks. I've never had one not work. I'm primarily retro. I don't do the Xbox and the PlayStation so much. I have not had a lot of success repairing those.
I think
if you have the knowledge,
remember if you have the knowledge, it's just we've reached a point now, and I always talk about the garbage phases of certain gens when they finally gotten down to rock bottom pricing, because it's the thing that everyone's getting rid of. It's also the thing that maybe on the end of its lifespan. I think most of your fat PS3s too are a great example of that. I don't buy many of those that are working. The better part of them are already yellow light of death. You already know that that's what it's going to be when you get it, because they're just at the end of their lifespan. It's just one of those things. Xbox 360 too. They're almost always red ring. The old ones, they're old. They've been rode hard, put up wet, and it's just. Yeah, we're even getting there on the Xbox One now, to where some of those are like, man, because people still want a lot for it because it still sounds great. Xbox One, I got an Xbox One, but it really isn't that. We're almost to the 360 era on that now, where that's like it's 10 years old. It could have just as much wrong with it. And talk about not having a badge for something. I mean, there's things I can work on, but you got to know your limits, and you also got to know, even if you do know what you're doing, you don't want to get into something that's going to take hours and hours to do and still maybe not be salvageable.
I can only fix things that I can actually see the components, not all this surface mount stuff.
Yeah, it's intense. And, the retro stuff tends to be the easy stuff, obviously, because it's, you basically clean it up half the time. It's okay. And there may be a few components you got to change out. But, yeah, the newer consoles, it's hit or miss. It's a coin toss. A lot of times it's being sold because it's broken. And a lot of times the people that are selling it have it because where they got it from, it ended up there because it's broken in a storage locker, in an old box in the back of somebody's truck. These things are forgotten and lost to time. So you can get them for a good price and fix them. That's really rewarding, that it gets put back out there in the market. That adds supply to this ever growing demand. It doesn't seem the bubble's ever going to pop. That's the good part of this. It actually does bring prices down when you bring things back from the dead and make more of them available.
Yeah.
Because in the PS3, God, we keep going back to that, but that's a console that a lot of people are trying to collect for right now, because it's you don't know what you got till it's gone kind of thing. People are flipping about 360 games right now too. I noticed a lot of creators doing videos about, oh my God, we didn't get 360 stuff in time, and now we can't. And but it was in its garbage phase not long ago. The last couple of years, that was the stuff I was buying for $1 a hit, and it was everywhere. You couldn't throw a rock without hitting some Xbox stuff. Yeah. It was everywhere.
I'm
still
in the mindset that PS2 is worthless, and that stuff skyrocketed a couple of years ago.
You're not wrong. I mean, most of it is. Most of it's $10 or less, and as much as it costs to do online business these days, it's really just not worth your time to mess with as far as that goes. As far as collecting it, though, definitely, if you can pick that stuff up super cheap, you can still build a collection super cheap. And, I always talk with people about those garbage phases, the systems and games that are still in those phases, and where, okay, maybe you want a complete NES collection, but don't be afraid to lean in on some other areas right now and collect that other stuff and be patient with it when you do find it. Because right now, it is obviously, not a buyer's market on a lot of that stuff. Unless you just do find it somewhere, you are probably overpaying.
Well, and to your point there, I mean, on a couple things. So, like when it comes to the consoles, I mean, the thing is like a lot of things nowadays, nothing's built like it used to be built. You could get so many different things that would last forever, and it's just the way the market is now. They don't build the stuff to last. And there's a lot more proprietary parts in them, different things that make them harder to, keep them going compared to a lot of these retro consoles. And because to the point, like I really don't dab anything PS3 up, for a lot of those same reasons. It's just to try to get those parts. Now, if it's like a disk drive or something big, that you can still easily get a replacement part and put it in, that's one thing. But I don't go as in depth on those as I do like the older stuff, like Atari 7800s, ColecoVisions, things like that. But then the other thing is to keep in mind is that I think we've all seen it, and probably those in chat, just things come in waves. So to your point, like those quote unquote garbage phases and stuff. And what I think, just kind of looking on it for so long, is that it's as different age groups of people get to a point when they have disposable income. So then from there, they want to now experience their childhood. So, at one time, Xbox 360 was not that group yet. So you're right. You could go get the stuff bottom of the barrel. And now people are like, well, now I got disposable income. Now I want to go back and re-experience my teenage years when I had a 360. And
it hurts me to say that the 360 crowd, they're in their 30s now.
Right. I mean, so I mean, and I think that's what we see. I mean, COVID didn't help the market at all. That's
what started this
caused
boom.
Such a huge boom in stuff. But
it wasn't just with games; it was with a lot of things.
Right,
a lot of markets went absolutely crazy and have never gotten back to what they were. And there is good and bad actually to both. There's sides to it, and it's the market, man. Things have markets. Markets are ever changing. And any market, stock market, anything with market in it, you got to adapt to something. At some point, things are going to change.
Isn't that the truth?
Well, that's a large part of what I would like the show to be about. At least you can tune into this show, and the things that I find, you know what they're going for at a given time. Because a lot of times it's the stuff that you also are going to run up on. I'm not the guy that finds every sealed Pokemon game ever made and a thing at Goodwill. That just doesn't happen on the show. Some people,
I don't think you can find anything good at Goodwill anymore, because a
lot of them, you can't. They don't. The ones here that they don't have games anymore. They're all shipped off site to the auction houses where they sell them online. So they do not carry games. There's no point going in there if that's
or if they do have something, they're so marked up. It's just like, it's not like before where you could go and get a console for $5-10. I mean,
best you'll find a peripheral or something like that.
There are still deals to be found at thrift stores, but I find it's usually the local thrift stores. It's not like a Value Village or a Goodwill anymore. I have one of my best scores ever was at a Value Village. I caught him slipping. I don't know if we want to talk about thrifting or anything like that, but like I used to work 2 blocks from a Value Village. And the thing with any kind of thrift store, whether it be Goodwill, Salvation Army, Value Village, is you've got to go often, because every 40 times I went, I'd find something. Like you always have that little batch of like Wii games or whatever, but keep going back. And I would go every day at lunch. I would just force myself to go for a walk, and even if the weather was bad. And it wasn't until like the best score I ever found at Value Village, it was on a day that it snowed like 3 feet. And I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to go for my walk. And I went for my walk, and I got there, and they were totally slipping up, complete in box, even with the little baggies on the carts, Nintendo 64 games, good quality games, $8 Canadian each, like Zelda, Mario Kart, like all these different games. There's probably about 15 of them, and I was just like, yes, walked out with that. Mr. Postal wants to get beat up. I am going to drive down and beat you up.
You know, the thing that my show hasn't done in a while is yard sales, because it's just it's easier for me to just walk around the flea and hit one place. But I will say the quality. I wanted to touch on this. The quality of the items you get, for whatever reason, at yard sales tends to be a lot better, because the flea markets, oftentimes the people selling there, they're not the original owners or even owners at all necessarily of those items. It's just stuff that, like I say, they buy storage lockers, or they buy a trailer full of stuff, or where, and they don't really know anything about it. They're just selling it. And that includes, they don't know whether or not it works. But generally when you're at somebody's house and you're buying their things, you still don't get a guarantee that it works. But I feel a little better when they tell me it does, because I don't know, I just go by the numbers and percentages. I have better luck with items that come from yard sales that end up actually working when you get them back.
Yeah,
it's about the season for that.
I used to do yard sales a lot. I don't do it so much anymore, mostly because I'm not a morning person. But I found there was a good amount of stuff, but it was never the stuff that I was looking for. I did pick up a lot of PlayStation, a lot of, Xbox, that type of stuff. But as a retro guy, when I first started going to garage sales, you'd find it, and it's just completely dried up. It's like a absolute gold mine when you find one, because they want like $5 for this box of NES stuff. But for the stuff I'm looking for. But again, the garage sales, they kind of go in waves too, based on the age of the children. Like the kids go off to college, all of a sudden their old games are in a garage sale, and that's the stuff you're going to find.
So to the question in the chat there about the Legends of WrestleMania signed by 2 wrestlers in the game, that depends on the wrestlers, because right now, I mean, sports memorabilia too is something that's at an all-time high. Speaking of markets that went crazy after COVID. So yeah, depending on what wrestlers you have on there, the value is not even in the game so much as those autographs, and if they can be authenticated. If you're talking, Hulk Hogan or somebody like that, you got something pretty significant there. I got to be interested in that.
Find the right place to sell it. That's a big part of it.
Well, what I would do to value that, honestly, is, you can look at the value of the game on eBay and see what it's going for these days. But I would probably look at, a sports card that has an autograph from those same wrestlers, see what sold listings are going for that. And you can kind of estimate, antique roadshow style, the autographs with the game, roundabout what those two things together would probably come out to. That's what I would do.
I got a story to tell. When I worked, I'm retired Postal Service, okay? And I used to work in field maintenance, and so we would drive around, and long story short, we had lunch breaks, okay, and on weekends, and sometimes we'd have yard sales going around. And I used to love to play chess, still do actually. And I walked in, and there was this brand new tournament chess set at this yard sale. And at the time, these things were going around, I guess about $40, and brand new, still shrink wrapped, the whole nine. And the person was asking $10 for it. And I was just going to pull out $10. I wasn't going to even haggle, because I knew it was worth every penny. And my buddy looked at me. He says, "You're not going to pay $10 for that, are you?" I said, "Absolutely, I'm going to pay $10 for that." He goes, "No, you're not." And he grabbed that out of my hand. And he said, and he went up to that lady and he says, I kid you not, he says, "Will you take $1 for this?" And honestly, this is me the way I am. I got embarrassed. I seriously got embarrassed. And she looked at him, and if looks could kill, he'd have been a dead man. She was very upset. You could visibly upset. But she paused. And then she said, grudgingly so, "Yes." And then he looks at me and says, "Pay the lady." So I reached in my pocket and I got out $1 and I paid her, and I just kind of tucked my tail and went on into the truck. And then when he came out to the truck, I said, "Now, Jerry, I'm gonna tell you something. You embarrassed me at the yard sale." And he said, "Phil, let me tell you something. Did you know that lady?" And I said, "No." And he says, "Do you think you're ever gonna see her again?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well," he said, "this is the way it works." He says, "At these places," he said, "prices are pretty much set for bargaining. You know,
That's some pretty intense bargaining, though.
that
Yeah,
now he really
that was
lowballed.
disrespectful.
I agree. It was
that's
very
big even for
disrespectful.
me.
Now that I know what I know, I think I might have come in at maybe 5 or 6.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I think the dollar was way too low. But the point being is that when you go to these places, most places now, I've seen where Emceemur people are dead set on the prices that they have on some of the places that Murr goes to, but a lot of these places they can expect you're going to haggle with them, right?
Well, they also expect that if you want a large amount of what they have, that you're not paying sticker for everything. So,
Yeah,
That's the big thing. If you're buying bulk, you always get a deal. I have never experienced, like, even if you're buying like 3 games, you can get something. You can get something off of that, even if they're pretty set. It's when you're just picking one, that's when it's hard to negotiate a deal.
Jim the Anvil and Greg Valentine. That's some pretty sick autographs to have right there, dude. I'd have a hard time getting rid of that. Again, I would just have to know what their autos are going for online, and then I guarantee you they're going to pay more for that than they would pay for the actual game.
I've
That's
actually
awesome.
seen that when I went to Pittsburgh to the Pittsburgh Gaming Expo last year. CK met me there and brought it with him and actually saw that. Yeah,
that's awesome.
He's very proud of that. But anyway, I digress.
But I think to your point, though, like I said, there has, and again, it takes, sometimes you might not get it off the bat, but I think there has to be a good balance there at times. And because one thing to just keep in mind is that also that when these folks are like setting up at like conventions and things like that, they have a lot of costs going into it. It's not cheap to set up at a convention, and if it's a multi-day convention, there's a bunch of extra costs even on top of that. Now, again, doesn't mean you can't ask. There's nothing wrong with asking, but I think the key though is just
you always should ask.
But I think just be considerate, understanding that they might not be able to do it.
Well, can I tell a story about that? Sorry, can I?
This is a good time for your Intellivision story.
I got a picture to show, Murr. I want to show you a picture. Well, first let me tell the story. Brian down there and I, we live in Ohio, and there's a Korg's gaming convention. Okay, and
it was at Torg where you got this.
Oh, I'm sorry, it was Torg. Excuse me, it was Torg's, and he's a vendor. He makes awesome game controllers, by the way. Anyway, I was at his table, and before then, I was walking around. This guy had a bunch of Intellivision stuff, and he had all this stuff, and I looked at it, and I just was drooling, and I said, "Oh man!" And he's like, "Make me an offer," and I had just walked in, and honestly, I go with a limited amount of money because I'm retired. My wife gives me an allowance, and if I go over that, I sleep on the couch for 6 months. That's the way it works in my house. Okay, so I'm like, man, I'd love to, but I just walked in the door. I don't know what's in this place. I want to see what's going on. Let me walk around for a bit. I might come back, So I did. I walked around for a while, and I actually had bought a few things and whatnot, and I had sat with Brian for a while, and I even told him about it. And as the day went on, I had $143 left in my pocket, and I didn't know if the guy had sold everything or not. And I went back, and this is what he had on the table. Okay, and
it looks clean.
It is.
Yeah, it looks great.
I told I said, would you take would you take $100 for it? Because he said make me an offer. He goes, oh, I'll take 200. And I said, all right. I pulled out my wallet and I pulled out $143. And I opened up the wallet. I had the cash all laying out. And I said, brother, it's all the cash I got. It's everything I got, brother. And I just zipped quiet. And he thought for a minute. And he said, he said, basically there was a double of one game. And he said, if I can keep the double of the one game, you can have the rest of it. And so.
That's fair. I mean, based on what I'm seeing there, I honestly don't know where in television the market is right now on those. That's not something I see much of anymore, but really in television is not very sought after. It's not a lot of people are after that. So it didn't end up being very valuable. And that's another system too, that when it dies hard, buddy. I couldn't believe what all was entailed in fixing one of those things. So honestly, I think that was a good price for him and for you.
Well,
television. I will say, in television is one of those things where, like, to this day, a lot of these games are $5 games, even complete in box, because a lot of it's easy to find the complete in box. But I will say, the Intellivision system with the boxed IntelliVoice and that Masters of the Universe game, he got his money right there.
Okay, so I have all that. But how I came about those things, I honestly don't even remember. I just have them. I've been doing it that long, so I know it was nothing significant, obviously, that I paid. Don't even know, what that came with. So it's just not stuff I see very often anymore. If I do, it's I might see one game. Just sitting there. Because
in television and ColecoVision and stuff like that, every once in a while I'll see something on Facebook Marketplace or Kijiji or Craigslist or whatever, but it is not nearly as common as it used to be.
Now, Coleco, strangely enough, though, even though it's not, as commonly have been purchased as the Intellivision, didn't sell as many units, it's still extremely expensive. But the Intellivision stuff just always surprised me about how cheap it was. And, if somebody wants to collect for that, it's a cheap console to collect for. That was something I wanted to talk about tonight, too, as far as...
To a point.
As long as you don't get into the homebrew...
I'm down to this. I'm down to this. This is my Intellivision section on my search list. Okay. And that's probably about $20,000 worth of games, that little list right there.
$20,000?
Dude's got a massive collection.
Why is it $20,000?
Because they're incredibly rare. There's one game on there that's worth $10,000.
He didn't pay
Super Spiker Volleyball. Super Spiker Volleyball.
Wow. Yeah.
Incredibly rare.
Can't say I've seen or even
every
heard of that
system
one.
has at least one that eludes me from getting a complete set.
Yeah, but man, 20,000, that's bizarre. That's not even something somebody would pay for.
So there's 125 games for the Intellivision initially. So this is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 13 games. That's worth more than all the rest of them.
Well, I wanted to touch on the fact that you got to kind of look at what is affordable to collect for. And there's a lot of creators that do videos about that kind of thing, like, collect this now kind of thing. And unfortunately, a lot of that is not the retro stuff that everybody's after. Everybody wants their Nintendo and Super Nintendo stuff, and everybody is frustrated. That stuff costs as much as it does. We are the demand for it right now. That's why it's so high. Everybody wants it. But right now, for me personally, I mean, I kind of have a leg up because I still have everything from all the years I've been collecting. I've been in this for decades now, but I'm really collecting more of Gen 6, 7, and 8 than anything else right now because that's what's out there. And that's what's dirt cheap. And when you think about pound for pound, the enjoyment that you get, a $2 PS4 game that I'm going to play is light years better than a $20 NES game that I didn't have, that I probably will never even touch. Not that I don't love NES. I'm just saying recently I woke up and realized I had variants of a dadgum Sesame Street game. And I said, what the hell are we doing? I don't want this. I mean, and it's like, you're not going to complete the whole set. I know people have, but you're not going to complete the whole set. So at a certain point, it's like, man, I've kind of shifted on that. I still collect, obviously, I still collect, but I'm going to collect what makes sense and what I'm going to actually use, because I've collected so many games that, I mean, a lot of them I'm very glad to have, but I look at some of these and it's like, why did I get that? Where did that come from? I'm never going to play that. You end up with a lot of stuff that's just like, I don't know, and you don't even remember how you got it. So right now, I think that if people are collecting newer things and just wish they were collecting retro, that's not as big of a problem as they think. In fact, most of this stuff, because of emulation, are available in collections all over these later consoles. I just think it's the better way to go right now, and it's just not even the right time to be buying retro unless the opportunity presents itself. And I have some ways that you can go and find those opportunities other than going out hunting at 6 a.m. in the freezing cold, because I know that not everybody's into doing that, even some mornings that I'm not. But I wanted to talk about eBay, always a necessary evil, but them shifting the way they've done things with their algorithmic search. They've pretty much made it to where it's not much different than YouTube's algorithm in a sense. It means that auctions are less visible now, because buy it now auctions, or they're not auctions, the buy it now listings have the ability to be promoted. You can promote the listing. You buy ad space. You basically push your stuff to the front of the line in exchange for a higher percentage on their cut, what they get of it. So what that has done is it's made auctions a lot less visible. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And I've rolled up on some auctions. It's like, oh man, well, this is going to be a banger. I just want to see where this ends up. And I watch it. But 5 days later, there's just nothing going on. And then you end up bidding and you win. And it's like, where was everybody at on this dadgum thing? Where I'm going with that is it's a good time to be watching auctions of lots. Like whatever if you want 10 to 12 NES games, you want a stack of Super Nintendo games, and that stuff does tend to get on up there, and that stuff does tend to get bidders. But there's going to be a lot less activity, it seems like, than there used to be on those things. I recently bought a auction of Xbox One games. It was like $16 shipped, and it was 15 games. And that's not haggling or making offers. That was the auction. That's where it closed. Just nobody wanted it. But there were some good games in there, and it was nice to get. So if I think for anything right now, it's a good time to be watching auctions and trying to snipe some really good deals in there because of the way they've got that set up. And I don't know why they did it that way. Hiding things, the lack of visibility for anyone's listing, that's not helping eBay. They only make money if you sell something. So I don't know. It's counterintuitive, but I don't guess they know that. Maybe they'll change it someday. But it's a good time to be watching auctions right now. I'm very surprised at what I've seen lately and what I've seen some stuff close out at, and just there's nobody looking.
Yeah. I know that I have personally in my collections course, you were talking about the later gen stuff. Now I've bought a lot from eBay, but it's been some of the earlier gen stuff. But what I've done is I've bought lots. When I say lots, I bought lots. And then when I've had duplicates of things that have come in lots of things that I've already had in the collection, then I've just relisted things from those duplicates and sold them on eBay, resold them, and then taken that money to buy more games in that way. So
it's a big part of any collection, especially once you get a certain amount. When people want to do that bulk sale. They don't want to be nitpicking out, because then they're just stuck with the stuff that nobody wants. So if you can buy a lot of 10 games and you only need 2 of them, and you can sell the remaining 8 for what you paid for the 10 or even more to grow your collection, I don't see anything wrong with that. I do see something wrong if you're going to try to gouge people and just the top dollar when you paid the bottom dollar. But buying stuff because you had the opportunity to buy something at below market price and then selling it for market price. There's nothing wrong with that, and
No,
it helps grow a
let's
collection.
talk about that for a minute, because to your point, the people that are doing that, and I'm not saying that I don't buy 10 games at a time and just keep 2 or 3. That happens a lot. But there's a lot of folks that'll do that, and they're not interested in selling at market value. They're interested in selling above, because if they are actual, if they're in it like it's a job, a lot of them have got enough stuff and volume going to where they can wait for those items to sell at a higher price. So they will list above market, or they'll go to conventions and sell above market. And again, you do what you got to do. I'm not trying to diss anybody for the way that they're doing business or whatever. But what happens is, this is what creates the rarity. Because when people, like, say you buy a game for $20 and then it's worth 50, and you put it on there for $57.95, and it just sits and sits and sits and sits. And that's what people are seeing. Oh, look, the price is going up. And it's like, well, it is if that's happening. Now, if you undercut the market for a quick sale, that's going to bring it down. And I've seen that trend so many different times. I remember watching Contra going from a $60 game to a $20 game in the matter of months, because it was a $60 game. Once everybody got wind of that, it's not rare. Everybody had Contra. List. They brought it down. But what we're getting into on a lot of retro stuff is people that are running, stores, or they do pop-ups or things like that. People that really do buy a lot of bulk and a lot of volume. They're usually pricing a little higher than normal because they can afford to wait for those things to move at those prices.
Yeah.
But that does take time. And the longer those things are where they are, packed up in totes, waiting to go to the next convention, maybe not
Demand will eventually get there.
Yeah, maybe not even online. So that's actually creating more rarity, because you can say those things are in the market. They're in the possession of someone that would sell them, but they aren't necessarily there for sale, for anybody, and at a price that it would move quickly. So it's a wild thing what the market is doing right now, and how all that kind of stuff affects it. A lot of people talk about the conventions up north too, where you really get some of these big sellers coming out, and it's almost like show and tell more than it is sales. Like, they want to see who's got the most little Samsons or whatever. And I mean, that's cool. It's kind of like you go to something like that to see those things in the flesh. Most people are not really there to buy something that pricey. But the thing is a lot of times none of that stuff gets sold either, because when you go in there, like, here it is, it's $2,500, and it's like, nobody's going to buy that. It's I don't even know if some of those folks are even really there to sell those things. They'll probably sell some lower end stuff. Most of that stuff's just on display. So if it's not, there's being in the market, and then there's being realistically in the market. I can put a copy of Wii Sports up for $50, and you can say it's in the market, but it's not realistically in the market. No one will probably ever pay that much for that again. So it doesn't help for it to be there. It's not something that can be bought. We've also got the situation with a lot of these rare games. If you'll just look around YouTube, and it blows my mind every day, I see new retro gaming channels. These folks that have gone right out, bought a bunch of auctions, cleaned IKEA out of Billy bookcases, and set their stuff up what seems like overnight. Boom, new gaming channel. People are buying so much. That's the demand. And again, it sounds like I'm saying everybody collecting is a bad thing. I'm not. What happens, though, is that demand, you've got all these people with all that stuff. Those games have found what I like to call their forever homes. They find, I got all the Pokemon games I got all the Pokemon games complete in box. I would never sell them. And no, rightfully so. You want to keep them. Well, they're on your shelf forever. That's that many less in the market. So the more collecting that goes on, people keep being really frustrated. I see on socials and stuff all the day, people are so mad about prices driving up, but it's kind of like complaining about being on the road, but you're complaining about the traffic, but you're a car on the road. You're part of it. You can, it can still be frustrating. I will not take that away from you, but we're all part of a demand. And it's like, I don't know, if it wasn't this popular, we wouldn't have all the great other side effects like the conventions and all the pop culture and the collectibles and the fun stuff that comes with it. So there's good and bad to everything You know, there's a yin and a yang to it.
Yeah.
But with as many people involved in it as there are, it's always going to be, I think, everyone keeps saying, oh, the bubble's going to burst. The bubble's going to burst. I don't think we're anywhere near that, if it even ever will happen. It's become something that's just extremely popular, and there's a humongous demand for now. So really your best bet, although it's a pain in the butt some mornings, is to get out there and rummage through the trash and hope you find something, because man, the really, really, really rare stuff, even then, that stuff's just, it's gone. You know, I think about the stuff that I was finding hunting 20 years ago. You don't find that stuff now. You're talking to a guy that bought a box TurboGrafx for $10. $10.
Woo! Woo!
In 1998, though. I mean, you're not going to find that now, you know, because that was its garbage phase. They didn't want that. That wasn't even a haggled price. I saw it from the road. I was driving to work, and I saw the orange on the box, and I wheeled over, about flipped the car, and went running up there, and there it was, and the guy had put a piece of tape and a piece of paper on it. $10, and he had the games, the turbo stick. I was like, well, how much are the games? He goes, no, all of it, $10. Done.
Wow.
But there's an example, right? I still have it. It's up there right now. I'm never going to sell that. I love the TurboGrafx. Where would I ever get another one at that price?
I don't.
So,
it's. I don't know if you guys
in the market.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with a game for the Super Nintendo called Hagane. I wasn't when I first found mine, and I found it in one of the local thrift stores. So actually, I'll tell you my thrift store story, my real good one. Unfortunately, this place shut down about 6 years ago. But in my city here, there was a reuse store, a little locally owned reuse store. And I used to go in there every once in a while. And the lady behind the counter, it was always the same checkout lady. And she's like, I notice you're always here for video games and stuff and electronics. Our electronics guy, they opened at noon on Fridays. And they were like, my electronics guy comes in the morning on Fridays. So the new games always come out Friday at noon. And from then on, I was there Friday at noon. And it started to be like I'd always be there. And then I built a friendship with this person, and she was like, these are the new games. I haven't put them out yet because I knew you were coming. So I would get first pick. I would get to look through them first. And I remember there was this one time she brings out the box, and it was a whole bunch of Super Nintendo games for $4 each. And this would have been in probably 2012. So at this point in time, Hagane is already an $800 game.
Yeah.
And I'm going through and I see like Super Metroid, Mario All-Stars. I'm like, oh, this is great. And I had never heard of Hagane. But I was like, I don't have it. And for $4 Canadian, I'm going to pick up any Super Nintendo game I see. So I pick it up. And I get home and I'm entering them into my app. And I'm like, that can't be right. And I look it up and I'm like, holy hell. So building relationships with people, if you can, the more people that know that you collect, the better. Because they're going to think of you first, even if, maybe you don't make a deal with them because they want too much and they know, all that stuff, but making those relationships. But really what the point is back then, the stuff that you could get, because sounds like I've been collecting for about the same amount of time as you have, but late 90s, like actively collecting. I gamed before that, but then I was like, no, now I'm collecting.
Oh, yeah, no, I get it. I mean, there was a certain point, I always talk about in the early 90s, I realized that games actually could be collected. I had a buddy that had like 70 games. This folks just like bought them. Everybody knew that one kid, right?
Yeah.
But when I saw it, I was like, man, you have a collection, because most people did not have 70 games. And it hit me at that point. It's like, you can collect games. Maybe I could aspire to have this many someday. And now
instead of trading them in like everybody else did, right?
Well, I mean, nowadays you look at the average YouTuber that's doing gaming, they all have these shelves behind them with all these. Nobody has, 12, 20 games. I mean, everything's in the hundreds, and digitally we have hundreds. And it's just an amazing time for gaming right now because you really can't ever run out of stuff to do. And as far as stuff to play.
And it's a real shame, to your point as well, finding that TurboGrafx for $10. I scoffed at prices 20 years ago that I would do nasty things for to get now.
Well, it's everything went through the garbage phase, like we talked about. And at one point, the Funko lands, they were blowing out 8-bit, 16-bit cartridges for $1 to $2 a piece in mass bins. And then when GameStop bought those, they were even more aggressive with it. And there were many times I was able to walk in there. This was around the turn of the millennia, about 2000, 2001, that I would go in there and there would be dollar Nintendo games everywhere. That sounds like a dream, and but we didn't think anything of it then, because it's like, well, I mean, there's lots of this here and it's that price. I'll buy 3 that I want and maybe I'll come back next week or something. It never would occur to me to have bought all of it. That maybe someday you would not be able to have these items at that price. And you know what? We don't know that we'll ever be there again. I mean, a lot of this PS4 stuff right now that you're buying for under $5. I mean, will that ever go? I mean, I know it's a completely different dynamic when you think about something that has to run off the internet too, in a lot of cases. And then, people talk about disc rot all the time. That's not something I've experienced much with the stuff that I have, but.
Well, and I don't think disc rot's really much of an issue with current. I mean, I think it's more that like Sega CD, Sega Saturn.
Yeah, I think we're pretty far off.
I mean, that was where you had those initial, but beyond that, it's not. I think it gets blown out of proportion more than what it really actually is.
Well, I can just honestly say it's not anything that I think I've ever had an issue with. Anything that I've come in contact with, at least in my collection.
I've only experienced it once, and it was with a PS1 game.
Yeah, I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying.
Yeah, thankfully, it was a cheap one. It was a sports title, but
okay.
Yeah.
Well, no, you're right though. I mean that's something I think about. Just what like our current gen stuff. What is collecting going to be like? Because of the fact that and because we've had this discussion before, where it's just the stuff's really not on the disc, and like the disc is just there as pretty much a glorified key to be able to download the software.
Yeah, that's the problem.
And we're seeing it, and depending on what company it is, I mean, they're shutting their stores down faster than others. And I'd say Steam is probably about your one main store that probably is going to hold the test of time, because you can go back and download games you bought forever ago. But Nintendo is notorious for it. I mean, they just recently shut down the Wii U and 3DS stores. So
let's talk about that for just a minute. This really frosted my cookie. He's
got these one-liners I love. You got to watch this dude's channel. I'm telling you.
Well, this was from your clip there of me at the beginning. That Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze. You want to really know why I needed that damn thing? It's because I had it digitally through a promo. There were some things GameStop did back in the day on 3DS too, where you would buy something and you could get one of a couple different games as a download for free. It was a promo. So that's how I got that. And I didn't have a physical copy, but at the time I didn't care because I have it. Great. Right about the time they ported it, actually exactly the freaking minute they ported that to the Switch, I go into the Wii U, I try to turn on that, and it says that the memory is corrupt. It would not launch Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, and it had been removed from the shop, right? I couldn't download it again. So I'm like, okay, well, is everything on that SD card corrupted? But it was not. Nothing was wrong with the SD card. I took it out and checked. They had just zapped my Tropical Freeze. It wasn't playable anymore. So they digitally stole it back from me. And it was like, man,
that's probably what they did.
So that's why I needed the disc. But
Dirty dogs.
You mentioned Nintendo's famous for a lot of really not so consumer friendly acts. And that was one that just really bit me in the bahonkus. I was like, dadgummit, my Tropical Freeze is gone. So not a problem now. I have it back, but yeah, you are at the mercy of the publishers on a lot of this stuff. And we also know that with all the parts that these machines have, especially looking at something as advanced as a PS4 or 5, how much more can go wrong with these things versus these ancient Nintendos that we pull a chip out of, stick a new receptacle on, and rock, and it lasts another however many years. So yeah, it's just a different, it's a whole different dynamic. of what we can expect in the timeline.
Well, and you know, because I think it's like, because again, I'm more for the older gaming, but you know, I got on a kick for a while with the Switch, and again, I mean, as much as I hate Nintendo's practices on stuff,
I love their product.
I love their first party products. I mean, I'm a
It's
sucker.
easy enough to get past when you think
Right.
about how much they've
I
done
mean,
for us over time, you know.
But with that said, though, it's just like, you know, right now we're okay. And, you know, hypothetically, there's going to be a Switch 2, which is most likely going to be backward compatible. We hope. But there's going to come a point, though, where they're going to move away from it. And seeing their history and the fact that most of the games, even for the Switch, you've got to download something for them to work. You know, that what is that going to be like in the sense of a collector's market or trying to revisit that stuff? And you know, that's something I'm real curious to see in the next, you know, 10 to 12 years. So
I didn't get into modern gaming till about 2010. That's when I bought my Xbox 360, and I just, until then, I was still just playing retro stuff, and I didn't call it retro. I was just, that's what games were. That never stopped being games to me. That's all I cared about. The more advanced the stuff got, the less I paid attention to it, because, you know, I did go all the way up to like the PS2 era, and I had fun with the PS2, but then everything just started rapid fire, and we started getting Dreamcasts and GameCubes and all this stuff, and I was just like, whoa, no.
And you needed online memberships.
I don't want all that. And but you know, I finally bit the bullet, and then I got into Call of Duty and playing that competitively, and that was it. And I begrudgingly went into the future, but you know, I'm glad that I did. And now it's all.
I mean,
part
there's
of the
nothing
same
wrong
thing
with
today.
modern gaming. It's just
No.
I think that the concern is just really, where is it going to be? Like, because like to your point, do you really own it anymore? And
Not really. I mean,
and
it's a whole different level of responsibility.
It's a
and
rental.
Accountability.
It's a rental.
Where at the end of the day, like, you know, I see all those Master System games behind you there. You know, you can just whenever. Again, I love the Master System, and I mean, you can go back there, grab whatever, pop it in, play, not have to worry about it. You know, where, you know, I don't know that we could say the same thing about the Switch or the PS4 or the PS5, you know, when that time comes. You know what I mean? So it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like anything, the kids, like my kids right now, like my two boys, they're 18 and 15. 20 years from now, this is the stuff they're going to be nostalgic for. And even if it's just, oh, I want it, because let's be completely honest. I know, you know, Emceemur was talking about, we complain about the traffic, but we're a car on the road. There's a couple of us here that are freight trucks on the road. You know,
watch out now.
No, not just because of this. Because
I'm
talking about collections.
All right. If I get any bigger, it'll take a train and two buses to get on my good side. Go ahead.
I'm talking about the size of our collections and that being out of the market, right? You know, but when my boys, you know, are feeling nostalgic for their childhood, okay, there may be a download for whatever the modern version of PlayStation or Xbox, or whether it's on Steam or whatever. There'll probably be a way to play a good amount of those games. But if they have memory of a specific PS4 game or Xbox One game, even just having that on the shelf, it's like, yeah, I have that because I had that when I was a kid. It'll still be collectible. Will it be as collectible as, say, an NES game that still works? Probably not, but it will still be collectible. And again, it depends on the game. And if you're looking historically, find what games had less runs, like lower production runs. They tend to be like the most expensive games for the NES and the SNES generally suck. And
Diddy Gaming's in the house, so ladies and gentlemen.
What's up?
Diddy and Mark Racer, ladies and gentlemen.
What's up,
but
fellas?
the whole thing being that because they sucked, they didn't sell much, and now they're rare. So now you have to pay a lot of money for them if you want to complete a set or you want to, you know, have that cartridge.
Big Bad Tom Jenkins is pulling up in here too.
I'm telling you what, man.
Now, I'll tell you a story about Cree Diddy Gaming. I was in a band with him many years ago.
Uh-oh. That's right. You were front man. That's where you got the name Emceemur, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And he does a channel here on the tube as well. And it's Warzone content, COD, like extremely competitive Warzone content. And if you get into that stuff, he does some really fantastic streams. He's also a great drummer.
Cool.
Hey, you know how you tell when the stage is level?
I don't know that I ever checked.
I tell you how. When drool's coming out both sides of the drummer's mouth. Okay.
Well, we couldn't ever play.
What do you call the only guy in the band that doesn't get a groupie?
Oh, watch out. Don't say the bass player. Hey, I got Mr. Bassman in. Mr. Bassman's in the chat. Mr. Bassman, I need you, baby. Mr. Bassman's in the chat. I need you, baby. Hey, do you know how
I
you know
used
when...
to be a drummer, so I take aversion to your drooling comment.
Okay, well, I got another one for you. How do you know when the drummer's at the door? The knocking speeds up. All right, let's go.
Oh, dear.
I'm a bass player from way back.
That's awesome.
That's right, man. That's right. All right. Okay. Well, guys, we've been on for about an hour. That's about how we go. That's about how we go.
Phil?
What?
You kind of mentioned this in our backstage. We got another 4 minutes before that hour. Why don't you share with the channel what the gentleman in the bottom corner there did for you and in the creation of the Retro Bliss channel?
Okay. Well, I was gonna share this with Mur after, but I guess I'll do it now. Well, during COVID, everybody's kind of shut in. They can't go out. They weren't going anywhere, doing anything. It was right before I was retired. I was mainly a PC gamer at the time. I had a PS3, but the only reason I had one is because my son was selling it and it had a Blu-ray player on it, and he happened to have and he sold it to me. He gave me his 10 games or whatever he had with it. So I took them. I wasn't really playing them at the time. So during COVID, I'm surfing through YouTube. Who comes across? It's Mur. I see Mur, and he's doing a review of Flashback 9 Gold, and that was a fun one. And I got my Atari 2600 the year it came out, Mur. I'll be 59 this year. 1977, the year it came out. I begged my mom and dad for Atari 2600. They bought one for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so you're doing this review, and I'm thinking I could play my 2600. I can go old school and play it on HD. And you were showing me how to add games to it. Not only play, but actually add ROMs to it. And I'm like, I'm all about that. And so, long story short, it went from that to the Retron 77, which I saw on your channel as well, and I saw some other things, and the wheels started turning, and I was on the verge of retirement, and I said, you know what? I like Mur, because what was going on, I started watching your channel on the regular, and me and the wife on the weekends, we would get the popcorn out on Friday nights, and we'd watch your channels. Yeah,
that's all I've ever wanted to be, was somebody's popcorn or coffee or cold beer channel. You know,
that's right.
That's really a large part of it. It really is, because I have channels that are like that for me. That I was like, man, this is what I unwind with, and it's that good.
Yeah, and so yeah, man. So without Mur, there may not be Retro Bliss Gaming. So I appreciate that, man, and I've had a bunch of fun with it, and that's really all it's about. It's fun. It's not about money. That's for sure.
Well, I talk about a lot about the gaming journeys, and that we've all had a different one, and we all come from different times, and that's the single most important thing that we can share with everybody on our YouTube journey, is that, what's happened to us and what we've done along the way, because nobody's done it all and nobody knows it all. So it's a really cool thing. I I didn't have a 2600 growing up, but I did come from a time where the NES was not out yet, and that people had 2600s. That's what they had at the point at that time. So I had a pretty extensive history with that as well, mostly playing it at other people's houses, and the 5200. That's what made that. But there you go, right there. There's a little thing about me that I meet people all the time that their big nostalgia thing was the N64. We're so many generations down the line now, and it's just interesting to hear what people are nostalgic for and why, and know that same feeling that's evoked with that stuff, to trigger that in someone, or for someone to do it for you.
Yeah.
It's just it's a great thing.
But it's also a thing too that, I may not be nostalgic for, say, the GameCube, but I can find so much common ground with somebody who is, and that's somebody that's a generation younger than me. And that's something that's really cool about gaming and the gaming community.
Mark is shouting out Gen X Grown Up there, Gen X John and the boys. So for any of you that have not watched Gen X Grown Up, that is your quintessential must-have Atari channel. They're just doing some amazing things over there. They always have. I mean, it's first-rate stuff, but John has really taken the Atari stuff to levels that I've not seen any creator take it to. So.
We've mentioned him on this podcast a number of times. So absolutely,
John's amazing. George, Mo, they're all just they're amazing people, and they're amazing creators, and they've really been an inspiration to me on my journey. As somebody that didn't know anything about how to do any of this production and stuff coming in, it's a godsend to have friends like that. On the YouTube journey, there's so much you can learn from fellow creators, and then they're awesome folks.
Well, I think we all as a community help each other, and I think it's awesome. So, and I know one thing, I appreciate you being on this podcast, and it's been a pleasure having you here. And I'd love to have you back sometime.
Sure. Maybe, I love these kinds of things.
Yeah. So I know one thing. You and my wife would get along because she's so tight. If she had a buffalo nickel in her,
pinch the head off it.
Yeah, I'm telling you what, brother. she knows how to squeeze blood from her turnip, brother.
Yeah,
but that's
I didn't want the channel to become an extreme cheapskates thing, but it's almost kind of fun. I almost get a rise out of going into GameStop, walking out with a free game. I mean, it's like, if you can do that, the same reason you scratch your own butt if you can do it. I mean, I don't know. It's just something really cool about it. Walking out with something that you paid very little or nothing at all for. And I wanted to touch on too before we close, and I know this is a thing that not a lot of people are into. They want the physical stuff in their hands, but there's a lot of sales going on digitally right now. And it's important not to slip on those digital sales. I've upgraded so many copies of, especially, we're talking about later model stuff here, so I'm not as physically attached to that stuff as I am old cartridges. But you'll go on the PSN summer sales, and of course your Steam sales. That goes without saying. But I'm talking about for the consoles, though, when you have a physical game, and you can still sell that game for $10-12 to somebody on the internet, but then the definitive edition or the game of the year edition is $3.74 on PSN or the Xbox marketplace, you're actually getting paid to upgrade, albeit not very much. But if you do that 5 or 6 times, I mean, I actually do an episode on the show, it's in the playlist, where I turn 2 games into like 5 or 6, I think, and end up with a couple bucks left over, more than I started with. So that's a cool thing to do too. I mean, as much as we don't want to get pushed into the digital future, we're in it. So that's another way to take it. But yeah, being cheap.
We had a podcast about that. We had a podcast about that. At some point we won't have a choice.
Yeah. And my kids have already started to figure that out too. My daughter's been buying up Blu-rays and DVDs and stuff because paying for all the streaming services is just, there's so many of them now that it's just,
we were playing, the wife and I, we have family over this week, and we wanted to watch Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, the old school.
Sure.
Okay, I have Hulu, I've got Netflix, I've got all of them. They all want to still charge they're to rent them, even though I have the streaming services. And I'm like, honey, let's go look at our collection. We probably still have it from back in the day, and luckily we still had it, from back then. I'm not paying $3 to Amazon or to Amazon Prime to download something that we've had in the, it's crazy.
Oh yeah, and Phil's so old, he brought out the 16 millimeter reel and set it up in the living room.
I'm
bye. I'm getting booted.
Oh, wrong one. He's gone. He's out of here. No, I'm just kidding. No. That's what I do whenever when he misbehaves. I kick him off stage. So
I'm the color commentary.
Yeah, well, if that's color, okay, whatever. That's how we do, Murr. That's how I roll. Okay.
I got
it. Not to the guests. I would never boot you, Murr.
Oh, you could.
No, bro. No, I would never boot you, Murr.
You could do better for guests. You never know.
Well, listen, you guys, thank you so much for watching.
Thanks for having me.
Next week, we're going to have Lewis Hill from Muddy Vision. He's going to be talking about his games. He's a programmer. He's programmed some homebrews for the Atari 2600 and for the Atari 7800, and he's going to be a guest next week at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So thanks everybody for watching, and we will see you next week on Retro Bliss Rewind. We'll see you next week. Thanks, Murr. We appreciate you, brother.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye-bye.